This is a project that I created using a gorgeous sweet pea stamp, and I have added some lace behind here, and I've colored the flowers with various sprays and mica powders, and I've used stickles on this one, and then I've added some tickets and this cute little I want to remember. The frame back behind here is cut out from Cricut, and then it's been sprayed to make it sparkly. And then I've added some bling here. There's a doily back behind that's been sparkled, and some dimensional paper back here that's been inked up, and that's been sparkled also. And today we're going to be doing a tutorial about these flowers, and I'm going to be using some ink and some mica powders over the top after that. And I also colored her face in with colored pencils this time instead of Copics. So we will get started. Okay, the first thing that we want to do is get some ink. And we have a blender pen. I'm going to go in and grab some color, and I'm going to start in the center. And I am using watercolor paper for this. It's a good idea if you're using this technique to use watercolor paper, because it tends to disintegrate regular paper because of all the water and water-soluble products that we're using. And as you go further out, all that color is going to get lighter and lighter, so you can utilize that when you're coloring so that your deeper color is in the center. See how I'm going back over and just adding a little bit of pigment after that. It looks a lot more natural to have a little bit more depth near the center of the flower, and that'll give your finished look more of a 3D effect. And I could go in and add more color just as I think it looks good. Some of this is going to be covered up when we put our micas over the top though, so it won't be as dark as it would otherwise be. And if you needed to, you could go back in and add more pigment to blend it more. We don't really need to worry a ton about that because we're covering it up with mica powder. Also, you can use different techniques if you're using different strokes. See how I'm using these long strokes to add a little bit more pigment in the center like that? You could do that. There are a lot of flowers that have that look naturally, that have kind of the veins running through them, and so you could do that a little bit more if you wanted to. Or you could just fill it in and put the mica powder on, because we're going to be doing that to accent it with some sparkle. So here we'll just fill this in and then go back in and put a little bit more of the darker color. You could also use markers for this technique. If you're careful, you could very gently shade a little bit of marker in this area here like this, and then blend it with the blender pen. That would be okay too. I'm going to just generally quickly go through and just add some color, and I'll just come back in and put more in the center. I'm going to squeeze my pad just a little bit more so I can get some more ink. You could also use re-inkers if you don't want to do it with the stamp pad. And if I were going to leave it like this, I might think about making the petals on the back a little bit darker if it were in the shadows. if you need to squeeze your pad more often to get more ink to have it a little bit more intense, you could do that too. Because the more that I work with it, the more it gets diluted. Depending on how much contrast you want, you would just keep that in mind. If I wanted to, also, I could do all the centers with a darker part and then just leave it really light around the edges. Kind of like how this flower up here is a little lighter. There you can kind of see. I'm not doing it today because I'm just going to cover it up. We'll add a little more contrast here. And you want to keep from making hard lines with this, just because remember it's not like Copics, it's not going to bleed the same way. So it's not as forgiving in that aspect. You can layer the color on top and it does make its own really pretty effect. That's fun for a change. So I think you probably get the idea. We're pretty close to being ready to starting with the mica. Oh, I gotta better color this bud too. Almost forgot it. See how as I get down to the bottom that'll fade out. Depending on how you put the ink on, you'll have a little more intensity in some spots. Okay, we're ready to start with the mica powder. And we're going to add a little bit of water to it. You want to make sure that it's not too gloppy, because we want to have it be light enough. You can start on a small petal and see how it's looking. Like I said before, I didn't need to worry a ton about blending because we're putting this over the top. We're not going to cover the whole petal, just as an accent. So we're just going to make kind of little soft strokes here and put a little bit of pigment into centers. You want to remember that even though these mica powders are kind of on the opaque side, that it's still going to show some of your underneath color through. So you want to make sure that your mica powder matches the project. Put a little bit here. That's getting a little bit wet, so I'm going to add a little more powder into it. There we go. Pick up a little bit more water. And you can mix more than one mica powder if you want to. Just because if you wanted to make it just a slightly different color, like if this was too dark, you could mix it with a little bit of a lighter color. Hopefully you can see the shimmer here. It's looking pretty shimmery. So you should go get out your supplies and play around a little bit and have fun with it. Thanks for watching.